I found the diamond necklace wedged between the mattress and the headboard of cabin 2047, sparkling like captured starlight against the navy silk sheets. The stones were real. I knew because my sister worked at a jewelry store before the cancer ate through our savings, and she'd taught me to spot the difference. This wasn't some cruise ship costume jewelry. This was the kind of money that could pay for chemotherapy, rent, and groceries for 6 months. My hands shook as I lifted it. The cleaning cart rattled in the hallway outside. Mrs. Rodriguez would dock my pay if I fell behind schedule again. But I couldn't just leave it here. The guest in 2047 was some businessman, Marcus something, who'd boarded yesterday with enough luggage to stock a small apartment. Rich people lost expensive things all the time and barely noticed. But they also had security cameras and lawyers and ways of making problems disappear. I tucked the necklace into my uniform pocket. The logical choice was the lost and found box at the purser's desk. Anonymous drop-off, clean conscience, back to mopping floors for 12 hours a day. But something about the weight of those diamonds against my chest made me hesitate. This felt personal. Important. 20 minutes later, I stood outside cabin 2047 with my master key card. He answered on the second knock. Tall, broad shoulders filling out a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in business magazines, sharp jaw, calculating eyes the color of storm clouds. The kind of man who owned things. People. Sir, I found this while cleaning. I held out the necklace, my voice barely above a whisper. Those gray eyes widened. He stared at the diamonds, then at me, then back at the diamonds. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise melting into satisfaction, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. You came, he said softly. I blinked. Excuse me. I wasn't sure you'd actually show. The agency said they were sending someone, but he stepped aside, gesturing me into the cabin. Please come in. The word agency meant nothing to me. Neither did the way he looked at me, like I was expected, like I belonged here. But the cabin was warm and smelled like expensive cologne, and his tone carried the kind of authority that made refusal feel impossible. I should get back to work, I said, not moving. Nonsense. We have arrangements to discuss. He closed the door behind me with a soft click that sounded final. Though I have to say, you're younger than I expected. And his gaze traveled down my cleaning uniform. More modest in your presentation. The diamonds felt heavy in my palm. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Has there? He moved to the bar cart, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. You returned my grandmother's necklace. That shows character. Integrity. Exactly what I'm looking for in a spouse. The word hit me like cold water. Spouse. I'm just returning what I found, I said quickly. I clean the cabins. I'm not, whatever you think I am. He turned back to me, one eyebrow raised. The shy act is charming but unnecessary. I specifically requested someone demure. Traditional values. The agency wouldn't have sent you if you didn't meet the criteria. My heart hammered against my ribs. This man thought I was someone else. Someone important enough to marry. Someone worth diamonds and first-class cabins and whiskey that probably cost more per bottle than I made per week. You don't understand, I tried again. I understand perfectly. He handed me one of the glasses. The crystal felt foreign against my calloused fingers. You're nervous. It's natural. This is a big step for both of us. But there was steel beneath his genteel tone. The kind of certainty that came with money and power and getting what you wanted, when you wanted it. He'd already decided who I was, and my protests only seemed to amuse him. The necklace burned in my free hand. I should have dropped it at Lost and Found. Should have stayed invisible, stayed safe, stayed in my place scrubbing rich people's messes while they played games I didn't understand. Instead, I'd walked into a trap I couldn't even see the shape of yet. The whiskey tasted like liquid gold and poor decisions. Marcus made 3 phone calls while I stood frozen in his cabin. Still holding the whiskey, I couldn't bring myself to drink. The first was to someone called Captain Morrison. Yes, tonight. The sunset ceremony package. Whatever it costs. His voice carried the casual authority of a man who'd never been told no. The second was to housekeeping. I need the presidential suite prepared immediately. Full service setup. And cancel all cleaning assignments for. He glanced at me. What's your name? Finn, I whispered. For Finn. He won't be returning to work. The third call lasted longer. Legal terms I didn't understand. Bonding certificates. Something about maritime law and international waters. My knees felt weak. Please, I said when he hung up. I think you're confusing me with someone else. The modesty is endearing, but we're past that now. Marcus straightened his tie like he was preparing for a board meeting. The captain can perform the ceremony in 2 hours. Just enough time to get you properly dressed. 2 hours. The timeline hit me like a slap. This wasn't some misunderstanding that would work itself out over dinner conversation. This was happening. Fast and final and completely beyond my control. I can't marry you, I said, my voice cracking. I don't even know you. That's what the courtship period is for. He moved to the closet, pulling out a garment bag. Traditional Omega customs, correct? The agency briefed me thoroughly. Omega customs. The word made my stomach drop. He didn't just think I was someone else. He thought I was someone else's property. Someone contracted and delivered like cargo. The suit he laid out was midnight blue with silver buttons. Expensive fabric that would photograph well under sunset lighting. A costume for a role I'd never auditioned for. I work in housekeeping, I said desperately. Check your records. Finn Carter, crew member 7429. I've been on this ship for 8 months. Cover story. I appreciate the thoroughness, but it's unnecessary now. Marcus's smile never wavered. The agency warned me you might be nervous. First-time arrangement, I assume. My hands shook as I set down the whiskey glass. The crystal clinked against the marble table like a small bell tolling. Everything in this cabin was designed to impress, to overwhelm. The Egyptian cotton sheets. The fresh orchids. The view of endless ocean through floor-to-ceiling windows. I felt very small. What if I refuse? I asked. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, exactly. More like confusion, as if the concept of refusal had never occurred to him. The contract is quite clear about expectations, he said slowly. I'm not paying for a reluctant spouse. The agency assured me of your enthusiasm for the arrangement. Contract. Payment. The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't romance or even attraction. This was a business transaction, and somehow I'd become the commodity being sold. How much? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Excuse me, how much are you paying? For this arrangement, I needed to understand the scope of my accidental theft. The magnitude of this mistake. 200,000. Plus expenses. He said it casually, like discussing the weather. A fair price for exclusivity and discretion. $200,000. More money than I'd see in 5 lifetimes of cleaning cabins. More money than existed in my universe of 16-hour shifts and shared crew quarters and rationing medication because we couldn't afford refills. The number changed everything. Made everything worse. I can't, I whispered. You can and you will. His voice carried a new edge. I've made arrangements. The captain is waiting. My lawyer has prepared the documentation. You accepted my hospitality by entering this cabin. The lock on the door clicked. A soft, electronic sound that might as well have been a gunshot. The agency guaranteed your cooperation, Marcus continued, moving between me and the exit. I expect them to honor their commitment. But I saw something else in his eyes now. Not just authority, but anticipation. He wanted this. Not just the transaction, but the submission, the control. The pretty Omega in expensive clothes saying yes to whatever he demanded. The necklace was still in my pocket, diamonds cutting into my palm through the fabric. I should scream. Fight. Demand he call security and sort out this insane mistake. But the weight of $200,000 pressed against my chest like a stone. That money could save my sister. Could buy medicine and time and hope. The suit hung between us like a question I was afraid to answer. The presidential suite was a gilded cage with Egyptian cotton bars. Marcus had me moved there after the ceremony, which happened exactly as he'd planned. Captain Morrison performed the bonding ritual at sunset with 2 witnesses I'd never seen before. Legal words in a language that sounded like ownership. I signed papers with my real name, thinking honesty might save me later. It didn't. The mark on my neck throbbed where his teeth had broken skin. Alpha bite, permanent and possessive. The kind that changed your scent forever, marked you as claimed territory in ways that couldn't be undone. I touched it gingerly, wincing at the tenderness. The suite was 3 times larger than my crew quarters. Marble bathroom with a jetted tub big enough for 4 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing nothing but dark ocean. A kitchen stocked with champagne and imported chocolate and fruit that cost more per pound than my hourly wage. Everything I could want except freedom. This is kidnapping, I said quietly. It's marriage. He didn't look up from his reports. Legal and binding. The captain's license covers international waters. I'm not who you think I am. You're exactly who I think you are. His pen scratched across the pages. Demure. Traditional. Appropriately grateful for the circumstances. I wanted to throw something. The crystal fruit bowl. The bottle of Dom Perignon. The ridiculous vase of white roses that probably cost more than my sister's rent. But violence felt foreign in this pristine space, like shouting in a cathedral. The agency made a mistake, I tried again. The agency delivered exactly what I ordered. Finally, he looked at me. Those storm gray eyes traveled from my borrowed suit to my face, cataloging details. Young, Omega, financially motivated. Someone who understands the value of security. Financially motivated. The words stung because they were true. $200,000 bought a lot of silence, a lot of cooperation. It bought things that mattered more than my dignity. I have a job, I said weakly. People who'll miss me. I've handled that. Paid your contract termination fee, plus a generous severance. Your supervisor was quite understanding when I explained the situation. Marcus set down his pen. As for people missing you, the agency conducted thorough background checks. No significant romantic attachments. No dependents beyond a sister who'll benefit considerably from this arrangement. My blood went cold. You investigated me? Standard procedure. Can't be too careful in these arrangements. He stood, moving to the bar cart. Drink. You barely touched the champagne at dinner. Dinner had been room service that cost more than I made in a week. Lobster and imported wine and conversation about his mining business in Tasmania. He'd talked, I'd listened. The perfect dynamic for a purchased spouse. I want to call my sister, I said. Tomorrow. After we've had time to adjust to each other. He poured himself scotch, the amber liquid catching light from the crystal chandelier. Tonight is for us. The words carried weight I didn't want to examine. We were bonded now legally and biologically. The mark on my neck proved that. But bonding was just the first step in traditional Omega marriages. Consummation came next. The claiming that made the arrangement permanent in ways that couldn't be annulled or dissolved. I'm tired, I said quickly. Of course. It's been a long day. Marcus's smile was gentle, almost fond. The bedroom has everything you need. I took the liberty of having appropriate clothing delivered. Appropriate clothing. I wondered what that meant in his world. Silk pajamas? Designer suits? Collars with his initials engraved in platinum? The bedroom door had a lock, but only from the outside. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in the wedding suit that felt like a costume from someone else's life. Through the windows, the ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. No land, no escape, just water and stars, and the low hum of engines carrying me further from everything I'd ever known. Further from my real life, my real name, my real choices. David arrived on the third day, carried by helicopter from the mainland like divine intervention, wrapped in a Hugo Boss suit. I was eating breakfast in the suite. Eggs Benedict the first couldn't taste, coffee that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. When Marcus answered his phone with the kind of sharp efficiency that meant business. What do you mean he's here now? A pause. No, that's impossible. I already. Another pause, longer this time. His face went pale. Send him to the Aurora deck. Immediately. He hung up and stared at me across the marble dining table. There's been a complication, he said slowly. The Aurora deck was where wealthy passengers took their morning constitutionals, breathing salt air that didn't smell like industrial cleaner and desperation. Marcus led me there in silence, his hand firm on my elbow like he expected me to bolt. I'd thought about it. Bolting. But we were still at sea, still in international waters, still trapped in his floating kingdom where his word was law and my protests were background noise. David was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average. Confident where I was anxious. Dressed in clothes that fit perfectly because they'd been tailored, not borrowed from dead grandmother's closets. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, his scent the kind of expensive beta musk that came from good genetics and better grooming. Marcus Ashford? His voice carried old money and private school diction. David Thornton from Platinum Connections. I apologize for the delay. There was an issue with my flight from Geneva. Marcus didn't shake the offered hand. His grip on my elbow tightened. I'm sorry, but there seems to be some mistake, Marcus said carefully. I've already completed my arrangement through your agency. David's professional smile flickered. Arrangement? Mr. Ashford, I am your arrangement. We've been corresponding for 6 weeks. The personality compatibility tests, the financial disclosure statements, the genetic screening. Surely you remember. The world tilted sideways. I felt Marcus's fingers dig into my arm hard enough to bruise. Felt the moment his certainty cracked like ice under pressure. Felt the terrible weight of understanding settle between us like a stone. This is Finn, Marcus said, his voice hollow. My husband. David's gaze flicked to me, taking in my borrowed clothes, my cleaning calloused hands, the bite mark barely hidden by my collar. Mr. Ashford, I think we need to clarify something. I'm a beta. From the agency. I'm your contracted spouse. The silence stretched like a held breath. Marcus let go of my arm. The absence of his grip felt like falling. Around us, other passengers strolled the deck, sipping mimosas and discussing stock options and planning shore excursions to places I'd never afford to visit. You're David, Marcus said flatly. Yes, David Thornton. Harvard MBA, portfolio manager, comes with pre-negotiated terms for discretion and exclusivity. We've been planning this arrangement since February. While I was scrubbing toilets and rationing my sister's medication, these two men were negotiating the terms of a loveless marriage like a business merger. Planning compatibility and financial disclosure and genetic screening. Planning everything except the possibility of mistaken identity. Then who, David continued, his professional composure starting to crack. Is this? Marcus looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me. Not the demure Omega spouse he'd ordered from a catalog of human beings. Not the grateful recipient of his generosity. Just me. Finn Carter, crew member 7429, cleaner of other people's messes. He returned my grandmother's necklace, Marcus said quietly. The pieces clicked together with audible precision. My honesty had condemned me. My integrity had been mistaken for an introduction. My simple act of returning lost property had been interpreted as the arrival of purchased goods. Jesus Christ, David breathed. You married a random crew member because he was honest enough to return jewelry? Put like that, it sounded insane. It was insane. A comedy of errors that had destroyed my life and confused his, and left Marcus looking like he'd been hit by a freight train of his own making. I can fix this, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Legal annulment. Compensation for the misunderstanding. Everyone walks away satisfied. But the bite mark on my neck throbbed with each heartbeat. Alpha bonds weren't easily broken. Marriage certificates signed in international waters carried weight in dozens of countries. And somewhere beneath the shock and fear and growing anger, I felt something else. Relief. Because finally, someone else knew the truth. Marcus's rut hit him 18 hours after David left the ship in a rage, promising lawsuits and compensation demands that would bankrupt smaller men. I smelled it first. The change in his scent from controlled alpha authority to something raw and desperate. It seeped under the locked bedroom door like smoke, making my Omega instincts flutter with unwanted recognition. Stay back, his voice came through the wood, rough and strained. Don't come near the door. But I could hear him pacing. Could hear furniture scraping against marble as he moved restlessly through the suite's main room. Could hear the soft sounds of distress that alphas made when their biology warred with their conscience. 3 days since the truth had shattered his careful world. 3 days of him avoiding eye contact, making phone calls to lawyers, arranging for my comfortable transition back to civilian life, like I was a discharged soldier instead of a kidnapped crew member. 3 days of pretending the bond between us was just paperwork. Marcus. I pressed my palm against the door. Are you all right? A crash answered me. Something expensive hitting the floor and shattering. Crystal, maybe, or porcelain. The sound of a controlled man losing control. Go to the other bedroom, he commanded, but his voice cracked on the last word. Lock the door. Don't come out until tomorrow. Tomorrow felt like a lifetime away. I'd read about alpha ruts in health class, back when I thought such knowledge was academic. How the hormones overrode rational thought. How bonded alphas suffered when separated from their mates during these cycles. How the need became physical pain that could break even the strongest will. I'm already bonded to you, I said quietly. It's hurting you to stay away. I won't, another crash. A string of curses that would have made my crew supervisor blush. I won't force you. Not again. Not after what I've done. What he'd done. Married a stranger. Marked me without consent. Trapped me in luxury that felt like a beautiful prison. Destroyed my simple life because he'd mistaken honesty for availability. But he was suffering now. Had been suffering since David's helicopter disappeared over the horizon, leaving truth and consequences in its wake. I could smell the pain in his scent, could hear it in his ragged breathing. "You're not forcing anything," I said. "I'm choosing. You don't understand what you're saying." Maybe not. But I understood what I was feeling. The pull of the bond that made my skin ache when he was in pain. The way my body responded to his distress with its own need to comfort, to submit, to ease the biological storm tearing him apart. "Let me help you." The pacing stopped. Silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility and fear. "Finn." My name sounded broken in his mouth. "You don't owe me anything. I know what this is. What I am. What I've taken from you. You didn't take anything I wasn't willing to give." The lie came easily. Too easily. Because somewhere in the last 3 days, watching him struggle with guilt and self-loathing, it had stopped being entirely a lie. The lock clicked open. Marcus stood in the doorway, looking like he'd been through a war. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes fever-bright with rut hormones. But he held himself carefully away from me, hands clenched at his sides like he didn't trust them. "You can still leave," he said hoarsely. "I've arranged everything. Money, new identity if you want it. Freedom. Freedom." The word should have been tempting. Should have sent me running toward the door and the helicopter pad and the mainland where I could disappear into my old life of invisible poverty. Instead, I stepped closer. What if I don't want freedom? His scent hit me like a physical force. Alpha need and omega response, biology older than civilization. The mark on my neck throbbed in recognition. "You don't know what you're saying," he repeated, but weaker now. "I know exactly what I'm saying." I reached for his hand, felt his fingers tremble against mine. The last part surprised us both. Want. Not obligation or fear or financial desperation. Just pure, simple want for this broken alpha who'd stolen my life and was now trying to give it back. "Finn," he whispered. I kissed him. It tasted like truth and choice, and the first honest moment we'd shared since I'd found his grandmother's necklace 4 days ago. The helicopter lifted us away from the cruise ship at dawn, Marcus's arms steady around my waist as we rose into pink sky. I watched the ship shrink beneath us until it looked like a toy floating in bathwater. Everything that had happened, the mistaken identity, the forced ceremony, the night I'd chosen to help him through his rut, felt distant now, like someone else's story told secondhand. But the bite mark on my neck was still tender, still real, still marking me as his in ways that couldn't be undone. "The house is private," Marcus said over the helicopter's noise, his mouth close to my ear. "No staff except security. We can figure things out without complications." Complications. Like David's threatened lawsuits. Like the cruise line's investigation into crew member disappearances. Like explaining to the world how a mine owner had accidentally married a janitor because of a returned necklace. The mansion sat on 300 acres of California coastline. The first week passed in careful politeness. Marcus worked from his home office, taking calls about our prices and labor disputes in Tasmania. I wandered the house like a ghost, touching expensive things I'd once been paid to dust. What happened next? How long would this last? What did we mean to each other now that the crisis had passed and reality was setting in? The second week, he started leaving gifts. Small things at first, books he thought I might like, chocolates from Switzerland, a cashmere sweater in exactly my size. Guilt offerings, I assumed. Rich man's way of apologizing for ruining an innocent life. I accepted them because refusing seemed churlish, and because part of me was curious about this life I'd stumbled into. The life where sweaters cost more than cars and books were first editions signed by dead authors. The third week, I threw up in the marble bathroom at 6 in the morning. Food poisoning, I told myself. Rich food didn't agree with working-class stomachs. Too much foie gras and imported wine and delicate sauces that my body couldn't process properly. But deep down, I knew better. The fourth week, I bought a pregnancy test from the pharmacy in town, driving Marcus's Tesla like it might explode if I breathed wrong. The pharmacist looked at me strangely. Young Omega in expensive clothes buying drugstore tests instead of going to private doctors like his class usually did. Back at the mansion, I stared at 2 pink lines and felt the world tilt sideways again. Pregnant. 1 month after choosing to help an alpha through his rut, built on compassion instead of coercion. Now everything was different. Permanent. Real in ways that went beyond legal documents and biological bonds. I sat on the bathroom floor and tried to imagine telling Marcus. Tried to picture his face when he realized he'd not only kidnapped an innocent Omega, but gotten him pregnant in the process. The guilt would destroy him. Had been eating at him already. I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact during dinner, the way he left gifts like penance offerings. Finn. His voice carried up the stairs. You missed breakfast. Missed breakfast because I'd been vomiting it up, but he didn't need to know that. Not yet. Not until I figured out what it meant, what I wanted, what we were going to do about the impossible situation we'd created together. Coming, I called back. But I didn't move. Couldn't move. The pregnancy test felt heavy in my hands, heavier than diamond necklaces or signed marriage certificates or any of the expensive things that had turned my life upside down. This was different. I told him over dinner 3 days later, when the silence between us had stretched so thin it felt ready to snap. Marcus was cutting his steak with surgical precision. I need to tell you something, I said, interrupting his monologue about environmental impact assessments. Of course. What's on your mind? I'm pregnant. The words hit him like a physical blow. His face went white, then gray, then something approaching green. He gripped the edge of the table, so hard his knuckles showed bone through skin. How long have you known? He asked quietly. 3 days. Maybe 4. I pushed food around my plate, unable to meet his eyes. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. Jesus Christ. He stood abruptly, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showed nothing but darkness and ocean. Jesus fucking Christ, Finn. What have I done to you? How do we handle this? It takes 2 people to make a baby, I said. Does it? I've destroyed your life. Marcus's voice cracked. Completely and utterly destroyed everything you were, everything you could have been. And now there's a baby. Now you're tied to me forever because I couldn't tell the difference between a purchased spouse and a decent human being returning lost property. He moved to the bar cart, pouring whiskey with shaking hands. The amber liquid sloshed against crystal like liquid regret. I've been making arrangements, he continued, not looking at me. Legal dissolution of the marriage. New identity documents if you want them. Enough money to disappear completely. Start over wherever you choose. My heart stopped. What? $2 million. Cash. Transferred to accounts David helped me set up. Untraceable, unconnected to me or this situation. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Raise the baby without ever having to work or worry or depend on anyone. $2 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real, like play money from a board game designed for people who lived in different universes than the one I'd grown up in. You're paying me to go away, I said slowly. I'm giving you back your freedom. He drained the whiskey in one swallow. The freedom I stole when I mistook kindness for a business transaction. Freedom. Again with that word, like it was currency he could spend to buy absolution. Like paying enough money could undo the bond between us, the mark on my neck, the child growing inside me. What if I don't want your money? Marcus went very still. Everyone wants money, Finn. Especially someone in your situation. My situation? Poor Omega, pregnant with a rich alpha's child. This is your lottery ticket out of poverty. Take it. The casual dismissal hit me like cold water. Poor Omega. Like that was all I was, all I'd ever be. A charity case who'd stumbled into wealth through accident and should be grateful for whatever crumbs he decided to throw. You think this is about money, I said. Isn't it? He poured another whiskey, larger this time. $2 million, Finn. More than you'd see in 10 lifetimes of cleaning cabins. Your sister's medical bills paid forever. College education for the baby. Security beyond your wildest dreams. My sister. He'd investigated her too, knew about the cancer, the bills, the desperation that had driven me to work cruise ships for better wages. Used that knowledge like a weapon now, pressing exactly where it would hurt most. What if money isn't what I want? I asked again. Then what do you want? I want you to stop trying to buy your way out of guilt. I don't want your guilt money, I said, standing up from the dinner table. And I don't want to disappear. Marcus froze with the whiskey halfway to his lips. What? You heard me. I walked to where he stood by the windows, close enough to see my reflection in the glass behind him. $2 million to vanish from your life. That's your solution to everything, isn't it? Throw money at problems until they go away. It's not, he set the glass down hard. Finn, you don't understand. I'm trying to do the right thing here. The right thing would have been asking me what I wanted before deciding my future for me. Again, I crossed my arms over my still flat belly. But that seems to be a pattern with you. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus Ashford looked genuinely speechless. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, surprised by my own confidence. I'm keeping the baby. I'm staying in this house. And you're going to stop treating me like a charity case you need to fix with your checkbook. You're staying. His voice cracked slightly. Unless you're planning to have security drag me out. I tilted my head. Though that might be awkward to explain to the staff you don't have. Something shifted in his expression. The guilt was still there, but underneath it I caught a glimpse of something else. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Why? He asked quietly. Because someone has to teach you how to be human instead of a walking bank account. I moved closer, until we were sharing the same breath. Because I'm tired of eating dinner in silence while you mentally calculate how much my forgiveness costs. Because when you held me that night on the ship, you weren't thinking about money or contracts or business arrangements. You were just Marcus. Scared and desperate and more real than you've been since. His hands found my waist, careful and questioning. I don't know how to do this without guilt. Then learn. I reached up to touch the mark he'd left on my neck, watching his pupils dilate at the contact. We have about 8 months to figure it out. The mention of pregnancy timeline made him smile. Actually smile, not the careful expression he'd been wearing for weeks. 8 months. Give or take. I leaned into his touch. Think you can manage not to buy me a small country in that time? I make no promises. But his voice was lighter now, playful in a way that reminded me why I'd chosen to help him in the first place. Though I did have something else in mind. Before I could ask what he meant, he was moving toward the safe hidden behind an abstract painting that probably cost more than my childhood home. Numbers beeped. Tumblers clicked. He returned with a small velvet box. Marcus, if you're about to propose to me in your dining room while I'm threatening you, I'm going to laugh. But my heart was hammering against my ribs. Not proposing. He opened the box to reveal his grandmother's necklace, the same diamond and platinum constellation that had started this entire mess. Returning stolen property. I stared at the sparkling stones. That's not stolen. You gave it to me. I gave it to someone I thought was a contracted spouse. You're not that person. He lifted the necklace from its velvet nest. This belongs to my wife. My real wife. The Omega who chose to stay even after finding out what an ass's husband can be. Oh, the word came out breathier than I'd intended. So, Finn Carter Ashford. He moved behind me, the cool weight of diamonds settling against my throat like a promise. Will you accept a family heirloom from your accidentally acquired husband? The clasp clicked into place. In the window's reflection, I looked like someone else entirely. Someone who belonged in magazine spreads about wealthy couples and their perfectly appointed lives. I look ridiculous, I said. You look like you're worth $200,000. I turned in his arms, laughing despite myself. Is that your idea of romance? Pricing your wife like livestock. My idea of romance is keeping you. His forehead touched mine. Everything else is just expensive accessories. The baby chose that moment to make its presence known, sending a wave of nausea through my system that had nothing to do with emotions and everything to do with biology. Speaking of expensive, I said weakly, I think Junior wants dinner. Something that doesn't cost more than a car. Marcus grinned. I know just the place. Hope you like drive-through. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next video.